People who worked at hotels during furry, anime, sci-fi, comic, other conventions. What crazy crap did you see go down? I worked security for a convention. One night, me and a friend had just gotten off shift. It was about 3-4 a.m. This convention was a 24-hour convention, so all of the halls were still open, and a lot of people were still out and about. We came across a girl passed out in one of the gaming halls while sitting in front of a console. We went over to wake her, and she kept falling in out of consciousness, probably drunk, but the thing that bothered us was a random guy suddenly appeared and said he was with her. She was alone when we noticed her, and this guy had just found her and had been looking all over. We were suspicious. He kept trying to take her back to their room, and we absolutely refused to let him escort her. She was not coherent at all. Since I was off shift, I grabbed one of the other security people and insisted they check to see where she was staying, and if she was staying at the hotel, that they walked her back to her room. Under no circumstances was the guy to be alone with her. We went to bed, so I didn't see a resolution, but I made sure they verified her room number and walked her back to her room. Story 2. I worked at a resort in the summer. I worked catering, front desk, room service, whatever they needed. I was also the courtesy shuttle driver. One week we had a convention, if you can call it that, of mothers who's lost their babies. It was a big support/therapy seminar. Absolutely brutal stuff, as you can imagine. So as the shuttle driver, I would either chat with my passengers if they were chatty, or if the guests were talking among themselves, I would have low music playing from whatever radio station. That way it wasn't quiet and awkward if they did stop talking or if it was a quiet, non-chatty group. So one night I need to drive $5 of these women to a restaurant across town. I think 2 of the women were leaders instructors and the other 3 were lost baby moms. One in particular was super emotional, and the 5 of them were in deep, way too personal conversation when they got in my shuttle. I made the executive decision to not say a word and just put on a little bit of low music. I did not want to hear this convo, nor did I want any kind of silence where all you could hear was sniffling. So my default radio station is classic rock, so I turned the volume up to like 5. It's very low background music, and I proceed to the destination. These ladies are in the shuttle, talking about kids and near crying, and something strikes my ear. The song on the radio is a song I love 99% of the time. I literally punched the center console to turn off the radio hard enough to where the women stopped talking and looked at me crazy. Is everything okay? Yeah, sorry. Song was Alice Cooper. Dead babies, I swear. It was horrifying in the moment. I can't imagine what would happen if they noticed it. Story 3. I used to work at a yearly convention at a hotel in San Jose, California. Some of the more earthy people who attended would use the hot tub. A lot. It was no secret that 1, strange bodily fluids would wind up in there, and 2, the water gradually changed brown due to people not showering before they went in. As a result, by Saturday afternoon, the hotel's hot tub was always shut down for cleaning and changing the water. Every single year. Story 4. I worked a Halloween beard growing competition, heavy metal concert, costume contest. Pretty sweet combo, right? Anyway, the whole event was 2 days of substances and beer-fueled partying. It attracted such a strange combination of attendance. The event rented out every room in the hotel, as well as gave us a cut of raffle proceeds and such. Because of this, they got a lot of leeway on not just hotel policy, but frankly laws. I saw 3 things an hour that should have had the police there. One dude was getting a tattoo of a pussy on his chest in a hallway. Enough said. Another was so drunk and high, he lost his wallet and room key, forgot what room he was in, and couldn't remember what name his room was rented under. So we gave him a pillow and blanket, and he passed out on a couch in the lobby. Apparently in the middle of the night, he decided he was going to find his room or something, because we found him sleeping on another couch on the 3rd floor. Since he didn't bring the blanket or pillow, he went in the bathroom and took all the toilet paper and covered himself in that to keep warm. Since the hotel was extremely old, the woman's restroom in the lobby had an old-school powder room with furniture. At one point, I saw a couple completely naked having sex on one of the chairs. The whole event was so surreal, I'm still not entirely sure it wasn't just an extremely elaborate hallucination. Story 5. My hotel had an annual fairy fest. Families would come dressed as fairies and it was nice and friendly. But then, after 8 p.m., it was adults only and it got weird. You ever seen 2 drunk male, satyr, and fawn make out? Because I have. Is it gay if they are different species? There was lots of interspecies action going on in our ballroom. Also glitter. Glitter everywhere, from the fairies and other woodland creatures. Story 6. I arrived to check in for a furry convention. Turns out there was also a block of rooms that weekend for 3 all-girls Christian high school soccer teams. The girls thought all the fursuits and such were awesome. The teachers thought chaperones were, judging by their volume and vulgarity towards the staff, all 110% Karens. The hotel staff I spoke to seemed to prefer the furries. Then again, I didn't talk to the maids. Story 7. My buddy took me to a con once. He went as a Smurf with blue body paint and nothing but white shorts and a Smurf hat. Since he was ducking massive, guy was 6'4", 260 pounds, and maybe 5% body fat, it was hilarious. He was this huge, jacked Smurf. Well, he got drunk, and he's a very huggy drunk. I lost him somewhere after he wandered away from the hotel and ended up tracking him down by following the trail of pissed off / heavily confused, frightened random people in the street smeared in blue body paint from his Smurf Hulk hugs. Story 8. Not during a convention, but I worked food service in a major Texas hotel for a while. We'd have dozens of events every day, sometimes with thousands of attendees. Really busy place with lots going on. One day I was walking down one of the main service hallways, and suddenly there was the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz, pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. Nothing else was different. No other characters or anything. I assume he was part of some event, but for all I know, it could have been a random homeless dude that robbed a costume shop before wandering onto our property. Story 9. Overall, I just want to say they're very nice. Usually nicer than some regular guests. They usually just have issues with money, like don't have CCC, or they try and fit like 8 people in a room meant for 4. They do provide entertainment, which is nice. Story 10. I live in a lively seaside town and work in a cafe right next door to my town's Comic-Con. I love the costumes, and it's usually a pretty chilled event, unlike some others I could mention. Last year, our Elvis competition and Armed Forces Week coincided with Comic-Con. At one point, a fight broke out between a Spider-Man and an Elvis right on the square in front of our windows, because said Spider-Man drunk rolled into a Dalek, which turned out to be a man in a wheelchair underneath. If that wasn't bizarre enough, the pair being restrained by a bunch of soldiers and observed by a crowd of other assorted mythical creatures and Elvises, Elvie, definitely took the biscuit. The Dalek was fine, the Spider-Man was removed from the situation, and I couldn't tell which Elvis had been fighting once it was over. Story 11. Our hotel was full during Fan Expo and Comic-Con each year due to the proximity to the convention center where they are held. Around midday Saturday, the fire alarm goes off and everybody needs to hold position until cleared by fire department and security. People were missing autograph signings, costume awards, etc., and were pissed. The guilty party was a guest cosplaying as Princess Bubblegum. She had literally painted herself pink with an aerosol spray that triggered our smoke detectors. It took around 10 minutes to clear the hotel and resume operation. The whole time, the lobby filled with disgruntled heroes and villains who finally found a common enemy in the hotel staff, demanding compensation and answers until it was apparent this whole situation was caused by one of their own. Story 12. I used to volunteer and eventually help run a con in Ireland. Once Homestuck got big, we were banned from one place we'd been using for a number of years because apparently nobody knew how to set body and face paint, so all the couches had gray oil-based stains on them. Another year in a different location, we had to eject a Deadpool cosplayer, a man, because he was following a girl around the con, harassing her over a Twitter argument. He was also breaking every safety rule we had for a while, so before we ejected him, we asked hotel security to follow him around, and they're the ones who eventually kicked him out. The treasurer for the con. One year got sick and still came in. The periodic counts of the money took place in a small room, and he insisted on doing more than necessary and got everybody else who had to help count money sick, including one person with asthma who developed a chest infection afterwards. He definitely infected other people in the con and repeatedly ignored requests from literally everybody to go home because he was a control freak. Theirs was a Donald Trump cosplayer. He wasn't the issue. It was 2016 and we thought he was a joke. The girl I later saw on Tumblr was. She was following him around, saying, "Hail Trump." At the time I assumed it was a joke, but I saw a Tumblr post from her afterwards and she was a fascist. Craziest thing that was actually cute was the couple getting engaged at the last con. They'd met and made a baby at the previous year's con, and they got up on stage with their con baby from their con nightstand and got engaged. If they have since separated, do not tell me. Also, this goes without saying, but the gaming floor was disgusting, and the guys there literally didn't wash. Yes, it was mostly guys on the gaming floor, especially after the first day. The con was probably evenly split, but I saw more girls than the rest of the con. Story 13. It was supposed to be a regular clean in the bathroom. Turns out, massive group sex. Next day was not fun. Story 14. I am not a furry, and honestly, didn't even know what furries were until a couple years ago. My friend who works for the Hilton by the airport told me about a furry con where someone decided to take a crap on the carpet. Well, the hotel event manager didn't like that and basically banned them from ever having the convention there again. But he also talked to all the other hotels by the airport and told them what happened. So now they're banned from all the surrounding hotels too. Story 15. A woman who was so obese she couldn't clean between her rolls and smelled so terrible, the con managers and hotel staff had to ask her to leave. Guy pulled up to valet his crafty van and he had loose cat litter turds in the car. Didn't believe the valets until I checked myself. A group of furries get so ducked up on something they just collapsed in the lobby, and we had to call ambulances for multiple neon fur-suited wolves. Guy shoved a pocket pussy into a hairdryer and nearly set the hotel on fire. I have so many more. To add, I forgot the worst one. A guy from a sci-fi con was handing back his keys, and I was looking him dead in his eyes, and it's had cum all over it, and I just didn't know what to do. Literally bleached my hands after this. Story 16, worked at a hotel during Comic-Con. Hulk Hogan was a guest. In the middle of the night, he ordered room service. Like 3 lamorobes of dark chocolate and other stuff. Really nice guy. Seth MacFarlane tips really well. Chris Titus won't let the valets park for him. And Seth Green is funny as hell. Sasha Grey was there too, but she had a huge entourage with her the whole time. Story 17. I wasn't the hotel worker, but it was my cousin, and I was at the event myself, though in a different room. It was an anime game convention where several gamers and cosplayers were at. My cousin was a janitor and has since quit the job. There was the receptionist area, the hotel area, and the dining area where this took place. My cousin was doing normal janitor things while me and my friends were still at the convention center. She was cleaning up around the dining area when 2 people started a screeching match over something or other. My cousin thought that whatever they were fighting about was probably silly and almost left the area when one of the dudes, looked maybe 20, threw hands with the other guy, also maybe around 20, and they broke a table. My cousin had verbally tried to get the 2 to stop fighting after the table had broken in half, but stopped and left it to security when they ignored her. This was at about 10 p.m., right when my little friend group and I walked in to go back to our rooms for the night. Walking around in a thick blazer and jacket as an anime boy for a good 10 hours is hard, I know from experience. My cousin ushered us to the elevators, so we didn't see the bloodied up dudes in Naruto headbands who were being questioned by security, so we had no idea that happened until my cousin told us. Story 18. I once saw Gandalf and Captain America crossing the road at about 7:30 a.m. the day after Halloween, in a village of less than 4,000 people. I want to know how you score an invite to that party. Story 19. My husband and I live in a state that's hosts one of the biggest furry conventions in the country each year. One year, we decided to crash it. We sat at the bar in the lobby of the hotel and pretended like we were reporters who were writing about the furry lifestyle. So we interviewed anyone who would talk to us. Some highlights. They all insisted it wasn't about sex. More on that later. Also, hardly any of them were in their costumes. They only had bits and pieces on, like a tail. We found out that it's basically that the costumes are super hot, so they don't put them on until later in the evening. They are also extremely expensive. If you want a good one with eyes that move and a tail that wags, it's $4K. They start out by building their character online, naming it, having a graphic designer draw the avatar, and then it moves on from there. Most everyone was very unattractive outside of their costume, but they were very, very nice. Once they got their outfits on, that's where things changed. Many had different color dog harnesses on, and then some would have the leash. If someone clipped their leash to your harness, you had to go back to your room with them. That's the sex part. Side note, there was also a guy there drinking out of a rubber prosthetic foot. Yes, you heard that right, a rubber prosthetic foot. It was calf down, like a boot. Had a sandal on it and painted toes. He had stolen it from a renter in one of his parents' apartment complexes. Story 20. I used to volunteer at Anime Weekend Atlanta. It's a trashy con, don't go. A few years ago, a large international rave known as Tomorrow World got rained out, and there were many ravers and partiers who had flown in looking for somewhere to have fun. Our CEO sends out several posts on social media saying that we have 2 raves that night and the price of a badge. Q over 4K additional tickets being sold. The head of the first aid dept spoke up, saying that since substances and alcohol were not allowed, she was confused about what to do with people who were already intoxicated. CEO said that we can sell a badge to an intoxicated person, then immediately confiscate it and make money hand over first. Cue several fights as the various people were treated just like that. Some people even paid extra for higher tiers and better swag, the highest tier being $550. Badges were taken for stupid things like bloodshot eyes when sound crews who had been up for over 24 hours wanted to enjoy music instead of work for a change. Odd smells from someone with a pungent vape juice, and doesn't look right because someone on crew wanted to body shame a dancer. It got worse. People were bringing in and hiding open bottles of booze, which were getting found and confiscated by under 21 crew. Holding an opened bottle, even if you didn't open it, in a public place while under 21 is a crime in Atlanta. The water kept running out, and crew had to enter service areas we were banned from by contract to get water and ice to refill the dispensers. And then the cherry on top. The rave was being held indoors. In a large meeting space, made to hold about 7K people, there were propane heaters in the ceiling to heat the room during the summer months. In case you didn't see where this is going, the music got so loud that one of the pipes cracked, and in a room filled with electronics, throwing off heat, laser displays, and people using vapes, cell phones, and yes, lighters to dance with when the glow stick people sold out, the con had a gas leak. We immediately had to terminate the rave and evacuate everyone, which meant a lot of people were disappointed for the second time in 12 hours. The con refused to make any refunds, and at one point, the CEO himself was refused entry because of what was happening. What tried to sweep it all under the rug and pretend that nothing happened. Story 21, regular convention. I attended that had a hentai-based late-night panel. After a few regular shenanigans, one girl got up front and stripped everything off in too so swift mood. Conventions I've worked at, I got to see various VIP guests, actors rip-roaring drunk. Indeed, some of the actors are talented enough to fake not being drunk long enough to get through their panel with fans. Security catches lots of teens trying to have sex in pretty much any place they think they can get away with it, behind the scenes. I don't listen to J-pop, but J-pop groups are super fun people in general. Not a crazy fact, but neat anyway. Behind the scenes with an actor, I was not expecting you to be wearing a penis necklace tucked under your shirt everywhere you go. If you see this, you know who you are. We still have a picture of you sticking it in my wife's ear. Story 22. I worked security for a convention for a few years and saw all sorts of crazy stuff over the years. I think the number one thing that people who don't go to conventions don't realize is that con funk is a very real and disgusting problem. The stank that sets into the air starting as early as the first night permeates every room and hallway eventually, and it's disgusting. Our hotel scheduled a deep carpet cleaning every year for the week after the con we hosted. Some of the craziest stuff I saw had mostly to do with substances. Apparently, people seem to think that a comic convention is the place to experiment with all sorts of substances. I saw a girl who had overdosed and was having seizures. She had smoked that had been laced with something she didn't know about, and it ducked her up. The saddest part about that was that apparently her brother was one of the paramedics working on her. Watching a grown man ugly cry over his sister as he thought he was going to lose her was tragic. She lived, but it was a scary time when they were working on her. I watched a guy in what we called the rave room start swaying and then pass out in the middle of the dance floor. Turns out, he had taken ecstasy and gotten so dehydrated from dancing that he blacked out. He had to be put on IV to get fluid back, and he turned out all right. I once saw a girl so drunk that as she went to throw up, she leaned over the side of the chair that she was sitting in and vomited like a fire hose, as in no gag reflex whatsoever. That was one of the more disgusting ones. Those stories, along with finding people having sex anywhere and everywhere, as in behind dumpsters and in stairwells and in the middle of dance floors and in hallways and behind D's and in empty ballrooms, really everywhere, except in the rooms it felt like at times. Lots more stories, but those are the ones that stuck out. Story 23. Didn't work at the convention, but Anime North and the Conservative Party convention were held at the same Toronto location a couple years back once. Visible confusion on both ends. An older lady ended up talking to me and my friends, probably because we looked somewhat normal and weren't in costume, about what was going on, and she was super into it. But we also saw a group of young men in suits get into a yelling match with guys in MAGA hats, saying they were ruining their reputation and the reason why no one takes them seriously. Still not sure which con the MAGA hat guys were attending, but overall, mostly wholesome stuff. There's that, and the time Syrian refugees were lodged in the same hotel as a furry convention upon first coming to Canada. Story 24. Wasn't working a con, but was a guest. My wife and I and the other couple we were with decided to go out to the outdoor balcony to look for some others we knew. To get to the balcony, you had to walk through a large meeting hall, where a half dozen or so cosplayers were having what I guess was a private meeting. They had stationed a guy in chainmail holding a lightsaber to guard the door. Ignorant of this, we started to walk through. The guardian of the doorway shouted, "You shall not pass," in as deep a voice as he could muster, and swung the lightsaber at us, striking my wife in the face hard enough to draw blood. That's how I learned Jedi Knights aren't really tough at all, and cheap chainmail breaks very easily when you kick it. Story 25. When I was working security at a university for one of the anime conventions, I was asked by the organizing committee to tell one of the vendors to duck off. They had been drinking in the main hall, smoking weed out in the courtyard, and generally being pretty unpleasant. It was a family event with a lot of kids around, so the organizers decided this was unacceptable. Predictably, the main guy didn't take it very well, and considering over half of the people attending that con were some description of LGBT and had been buying his products for the past day, I was somewhat surprised at the level of homophobia and transphobia being directed at me. You can have gays and trans walking around, but we can't have a drink and directed at me. He, she, or whatever it is. Now, irrelevant, but I'm not even trans. You develop a thick skin in the security industry, though, and I've heard every gay insult in the book, and a few more besides. I was trying not to laugh. The organizer who had accompanied me to talk to him was almost in tears, though, especially when he started to get aggressive and I had to intervene. She actually had a full-on breakdown after due to some trauma from a past event. I didn't ask for details. After a nice scene in front of the remaining congoers and threatening to do lots of nice things to me, he eventually ducked off, taking his friends with him. Story 26. I haven't worked at a hotel, but I have attended both an anime and furry con, and honestly, it was just 100% wholesome stuff from what I saw. So many hugs, high fives, interesting conversations with people, and complimenting each other's fursuits cosplays. At the anime convention, I got to geek out with other people over anime, play fun board games, and hang out with my best friend. At the furry convention, I got to see the incredible craftsmanship that goes into making fursuits up close and be silly and play around with other fursuiters. Also, words cannot describe how awesome it is to hug someone in a fursuit until you've tried it yourself. Sue Soft, Story 27. I had a friend that would work a big anime convention at the Baltimore Convention Center about 10 years back. I think it was Otakon. I'm honestly not quite sure. But the stories were pretty crazy. A guy complained because he waited in line for 45 minutes to get a sandwich from one of the food stands, and someone just grabbed it and ran into the crowd once he got out of line. People were randomly banging on hotel doors asking if they can sleep in random rooms. So as a result, people were trying to sleep inside the convention center. A lot of harassment reports by girls in cosplay. Story 28. I attend multiple conventions a year, and one of my favorites is a convention in Minneapolis called Marson. It's a small general sci-fi fantasy con with a floor full of creative and sometimes rowdy room parties. One year, sometime in the mid-2000s, we started noticing Scottish military personnel in the lobby and around the hotel. Turns out there was a platoon there that was shipping out for Afghanistan the following evening. The con organizers talked to the senior officer who was there and got free badges for all the soldiers so they could come up and party with us. For most, it was their first con experience. Some just hung out and chatted. Some did the karaoke. Some wanted to try some of the more creative drinks that were around. At least one guy got absolutely plastered. I remember seeing at least one hand-to-hand combat in the Klingon party room, foam batleths, I believe. They had an absolute blast. Sunday afternoon at closing ceremonies, the leader, I forgot what rank he was, got on stage and said some very nice things about the whole experience, thanked everyone for their hospitality, and then saluted us. It was awesome. Story 29. My hotel is close to the DFW airport, and I am a hotel shuttle driver. There was a convention going on at the Hyatt Regency at the DFW airport on the same day of a Star Wars convention. There was also a horror movie convention at the same time, at the same location. Well, I was taking some guests who vary from professional businessmen to airline flight crew. We were pulling into Terminal C, which is the same terminal that has the Hyatt Regency. And just as we are entering the terminal, I see someone dressed as Jason Friday the 13th holding a machete and dragging a body bag behind him. And I'm saying out loud to everyone, well, that's not creepy in the slightest. And then not even 12 feet behind them is someone dressed as Princess Leia / Star Wars. And instead of her hair being in the Princess Leia style, she has headphones on, and the headphones look like cinnamon bun, just like from the TV show The Goldbergs. Needless to say, it was pretty entertaining. Story 30. I worked security at an anime convention one year. We had two major incidents. Someone reported a girl who was walking around without a badge, and one of our team went to find her. Turns out, she hid her badge because one of the con workers, an adult male in his 30s, 40s, has been stalking and harassing her for several years and following her from con to con. He got permabanned from several conventions because of this. The second incident involved one of my friends. My friend is actually the parent of another friend, which is how I met her. She transitioned late in life, in her 60s, was probably in her first year of transition, I think. And she's also very overweight and a physically disabled veteran, which unfortunately means that's she also prime fodder for a holes to be a holes. And there were several young jackasses shouting obscenities and transphobic remarks at her. Another friend brought this to my attention and I notified my team leader, but ultimately there wasn't much action to be taken as we didn't know who the boys were. The cool part of this story is that several of the guys in our party pooled together like $300 $400 to get her a really Karenin sword at the end of the con, and there were many happy tears shed. Story 31. I haven't worked in one, but I did once stay in a hotel with some sort of furry thing happening. You really don't know how to be when you share a slow elevator with like 5-foot-tall fursuiter that is wearing clearly visible, colorful diaper under a pair of red shorts. I mean, like, it was on the suit, and the suit was really well done. I mean, like, didn't look like one of those cartoon suit. It was very realistic, and it was clear the person wearing it had a good body to wear it, since it appeared to be skin tight, had good posture and figure. But I have never been so, I don't know what is going on or how I should react, but this elevator is slow. Story 32. I've worked at several supernova conventions, and there have been a few harassment cases. Women will dress up in barely their costume, depicting a population character, which they do very well, and most people are really decent about, but then you'll get the 40, 50-year-olds who want a photo too, and then grope the young and touch them. Quite a few arrests and banning of patrons. My favorite is when this one guy told the Phelps twins, Fred and George Weasley, to put on their best face in the photo booth. They reported the guy, and he got kicked out of the convention and banned from working there again. The employees get a lot of harassment from patrons who are eager to meet their favorite stars. George R.R. Martin is super decent. He doesn't charge for autographs and photos. However, when he was there many years back, if someone asks what's going to happen in his next book, he asks them who their favorite character is and threatens to kill them off, or he'll just throw out spoilers of who he was killing off next. Fans quickly learned not to ask for sneak peeks. Story 33. I am actually a host at a yearly convention. It's pretty weird to be walking down a hotel corridor and see people in full-on head-to-toe cosplay that has probably cost hundreds of pounds and hours to put together. But I think the weirdest thing for me was the first time I went. It wasn't people doing odd things, but the absolute sense of togetherness. People talking to those they didn't know. No one was ever on their own. It was like everyone there felt a sense of belonging, like they were with their people, like they were home. To this day, I have never been in a place where I have felt so welcomed or felt that sense of camaraderie. Old, young, of every race, people with mental health problem, physical health problem. Every single person was included, and it was impossible to feel lonely. It was beautiful and like nothing I've ever experienced. I made a lot of new friends that weekend. Story 34. This kind of fits but isn't crazy, just more so semi-interesting. I was working reception at a hotel where the director's host of a documentary about the filming locations on the history-esque things of Game of Thrones or episode of a doc I can't remember were staying. They asked me if we had a large safe we could store some items in while they went out to film. We only had a lost and found closet or the office where we counted the money at various times. It was behind our desk, so there was no access for the public. So I offered to show him the spaces. He hands me a giant heavy coat and a massive sword and tells me that they're super valuable. So, to make sure they're safe. I, who has never seen an episode of GOT in my life, didn't realize they were the real props used by the guy Jon Snow. Turns out all the staff who found out the props were in our office went mad over them. We had everyone wanting to try on the coat and hold the sword for photos. It wasn't so much crazy as it was really cool for the GOT lovers to actually touch the stuff used in a beloved show. Story 35. They have a furry convention every year here in Reno at the Grand Sierra Resort. I always go gamble that day to see them all dressed up in giant dog costumes to see the expression on the face of confused boomers. Last year, 2 of them got thrown out for ducking in an elevator while wearing the dog outfits. Lumfeo. Story 36. I work at a large convention that uses 5 hotels and a small convention center. One year, they were moving my department's location, so my second and I went to check out the new space. There was a furry convention going on. Now my second is blind and has a guide dog. We could barely move through the hotel because all these furriers were so focused on the dog. They were acting like the animals they appeared to be and were moving so realistically. The dog was confused, trying to do her job, but really not sure about all these large animals all around her. I was audio describing to my second both what the furries were doing and what her dog was doing. We were both laughing so hard. It took us forever to make it to the space in the hotel we were trying to see, and had a huge crowd with us the whole way. I can see it could have been a problem if I hadn't been there to tell my second what was going on, but I would hope the furries would have realized that they were endangering her if that had happened. Story 37. Was working as a volunteer at my city's regular convention. I get a weekend pass for working one day as a t-shirt vendor. On both days I went as Pink Guy. Handmade suit, glasses, and fur coat to fit. Brought a drum machine too to rap over. Worked as a good attraction for the stall. On the day I'm working, some kid comes over while I'm basically doing one of his songs to get PPL's attention. He must have thought I was the actual Pink Guy because he started referencing videos poorly and talking about how cool it was when I did bit. In a bid to get my attention, he starts throwing his own fit by grabbing the t-shirts I'm trying to sell and chucking them around the place. Screaming loudly and pretending to have seizures. His parents didn't know what was going on, but didn't know how to intervene. He comes back every 10 minutes or so to do it again. Everyone's staring. Eventually, we have to tell him straight up not to bother me, which upsets him as his parents finally move him away from the stall. The stall runner was very understanding on my end. Story 38. I saw a person dressed as Edward from FMA crush a soda can in their hand and yell, "Alchemy." A couple dressed their bald baby as One Punch Man Security has to get called because a dude's tail for his costume got stepped on by a kid and it pulled out his butt plug. A coworker thought someone was dressed up as a clear butterfly with gold spikes. It was a cosplay where Gilgamesh from the Fate series with a transparent thing attached to his back sides and golden circles with fake spearheads forming coming out of the circles. Really good, to be honest. Saw a girl cosplaying as Aang in the lobby hiding, and I asked why, and she goes, Zuko. Later on, I saw a Season 1 dressed Zuko dude walking around asking people if they could help him restore his honor by finding the Avatar. Dude on stilts walked into a doorframe. Smelled body odor of the worst kind ever. Story 39. I worked at a convention. One guy in a fursuit kept trying to bring kids back to his hotel room. He was arrested. One girl popped her knee at the rave at an anime convention. She jumped off a stage. She was massively overweight. The convention is massive and the hotel we were in was not ready for it. The floor was damaged because of the rave too. At one convention when that Homestuck crap was at its peak, someone threw a bucket in a room. It hit a 5-year-old in the head and blinded him. I wasn't there for it, but I saw the aftermath. I don't know if they ever caught them for the record. A lot of conventions, really ducking hate, Homestuck fans and cosplay, because for some reason they are the most destructive and annoying people to work with at conventions. They aren't popular anymore, but a few years ago they were massively popular and created a whole bunch of problems. Story 40. I don't work at a hotel, but I've been going to various anime and gaming-related conventions for several years now. Probably the most amusing event was the year the Columbus Convention Center in Ohio hosted a GOP rally and speech by the current president on the same day as the first day of Matsuri on anime convention. Attendees of the con knew in advance, and it was thought that given everything was happening in a separate part of the convention center, the two groups wouldn't have contact with one another. That thought was wrong. There have been few events in my life more amusing than seeing well-dressed conservative politicians and their supporters commingling with anime cosplayers as they try to navigate to their respective venues within the convention center. I saw several with phones out and recording, and nearly all had stunned looks of astonishment painted on their faces. Story 41. Didn't work. I attended Anime Expo. The dances they hold are a lot of fun, but you do get the creepy person in the back watching girls to see if they are alone. Every time I saw a creep force a girl to dance with him, I would dance with her and whisper, ask if she was comfortable. If she shook her head no, I would pull her against my body and dance with her while glaring at the dude. I'm a 5'9" female, pretty solid. I'll also alert some dudes near us about the creeper and they would dance around us so the creeper couldn't get through. I followed him all over the dance and ruined each attempt if the girl wasn't comfortable. Guy finally gave up and left. Story 42. Stayed at a hotel hosting an anime con. The same weekend I helped pick out my sister's wedding dress. Everyone was super nice, but my mom and I ended up with a bad case of convention flu all the same in Story 43. I got arrested at a con my company went to every year to buy magic cards after drinking all day. Doing some blow, they called the cops because we were stupid enough to smoke way too much. We in the hotel room. Sober now, 3 years. I was nice enough to take the blame for everyone, since my boss was there. But I remember getting to the station, and the cops asking me about all the weirdos at the hotel, and the lady cap asking about the packs of magic cards in my pocket, and the other cap replied with, "You don't know what magic cards are?" She looked at him like he was such a nerd for knowing. Sorry for any grammar errors, it's not my strong suit. Story 44. I live in San Diego. When Comic-Con rolls around, if you are going to the malls where all of the out-of-towners are sleeping, you will see some hilarious groups waiting, like a crafty Elsa next to mediocre Final Fantasy characters, next to a really well-done Galactus. Also, my dad works for SDG, San Diego Gas and Electric, and he had to work down near the convention center once. He said it was hilarious because you had these really pretty model girls that were wearing high-as-hell high heels advertising certain things. He also had to tell a Chewbacca to move so he could park, and the guy stayed in character to basically go, "Come on, man." Story 45. Wasn't working, but at Anime Central about 2013, I was in the elevator at the main hotel. 3 Nazis walk in full-dress uniforms. They start singing Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash in German. The elevator goes up a floor. A furry walks in, dead silent. Story 40C. I was working in a hotel near this furry convention, and one of the cleaners asked me to come check on this room with them, because apparently they'd found some weird stuff there. I asked them what was wrong, and when we got to the room, she pointed out what she'd found. It was basically a normal furry costume, but had massive holes cut out on the chest. Alongside it, we found some type of leather stuff, whips, a taser, and a 5-sided sex toy. Even the toy was covered in hair. Story 47. I wasn't con staff there, but a few years ago, I was at a Comic-Con that almost got shot up. They actually never directly told anyone in the convention center there was any threat. There was just an Until further notice, all prop weapons are banned for the duration of Comic-Con. And a couple minutes later, a friend's mom called asking, "Hey, you still alive?" They ended up evicting Ultra Saber's booth for some reason because of it, despite them peddling, lightsabers. Story 48. I was a guest, not a worker, but I was doing college visits in 2012 and went to check out Vanderbilt in Nashville. Can't remember the name of the hotel, but it was hosting two conventions at the time, anime and the horror and tattoo convention. All I can say is it was one of the most interesting times of my life. We had fully tatted bikers, full anime costumes, and people in horror makeup all riding the same elevators. I don't have any crazy stories really, but I asked one of the valets how he kept a straight face, and he said it was the hardest thing he has ever done. Story 49. I've worked F&B at a hotel. We had a furry convention, and they were nice guests. Besides the costumes, I never saw anything crazy in the lobby and restaurant. Funniest thing I got was when taking an order. This lady would end every sentence saying, "Meow, meow," but it was all in good fun. I even talked to security who watched the convention hall, and he said the same thing. I expected a DashCon, but it was like any other group that would stop by. Story 50. The Libertarian National Convention was being held at a hotel across the street from MegaCon in 2016. I didn't work there, but I was staying at the hotel. I met Vermin Supreme by the pool while I was carrying Walt Disney's frozen head, while a formal wedding was happening in the garden terrace 30 feet away. Story 51. I work at a relatively small hotel in a smallish major city. We had some sort of small Comic-Con going on at the same time as Music Festival season one year. So at any given moment, the lobby and restaurant were filled with equal parts metalheads and Comic-Con attendees. The craziest experience of the entire weekend, though, was when I was standing by the door talking to the literal drummer for Slipknot. And all of a sudden, this man about 3 times my size and dressed as Chewbacca came barreling through and almost plowed us both over to get out of the door, all without having any idea who the man was. Story 52. I used to date with a cosplay girl, and I actually went to that kind of events, and the weirdest thing that I've ever seen in the otaku world is a 24-year-old guy dressed like a cat. He was dancing, and he won an award. The context is a competition of dance inside the event, but you must wear a costume to participate. This kid has better moves, and all the girls were jealous of him, included my ex-girlfriend. Story 53 was at an anime convention in Columbus, Ohio. Packed walkways, and I was sitting at a table playing Magic with a friend. One person in the crowd just screamed loudly for no reason. Another person responded in like fashion. Then another and another. In about 8 seconds, everyone was screaming and shouting for no reason. A barrage of staff and security poured into the area, and everyone stopped screaming immediately and just went about their business like nothing ever happened. The look on the staff's faces was priceless. Just confusion, fear, and bewilderment. Story 54. I didn't work there, but last Anthrocon, some asshat vaped in his room and set off the fire alarm in the hotel. He wasn't even attending the convention. Story 55. Never worked at the hotel, but stayed there for work during a swingers convention. Our company has 5 dedicated rooms that we use every day. Show up to the hotel to get our rooms, and all the hallways are barricaded with paper on all windows into the pool area. One coworker, someone manages to leave his room and got through an area that was blocked off and by the pool. He said it was dozens of people naked on every surface. It's a duck fest for 3 days straight. Story 56. I don't work anywhere like that, but I do competitive cheer. This one time, there was a comic anime convention at the same time as the competition I was in. I saw a Pokemon character in a fist fight with someone in a Sailor Moon costume, while other random characters chanted and filmed. That's when I found out I had taken a wrong turn and ended up in the wrong venue. My mom and I did have a good laugh though. Story 57. I worked at a friend's figure collectibles / stuffed animal booth for an anime convention. Most of it was chill, but when the furries started showing up, mind you, this is a con that is definitely not for their kind. Everybody started practicing social distancing around them. Also, there was some creepy dude, 60 or 70, and looked at all of the lewd figures the booth had. Disgusting. Story 58. Saw a massive group fighting about reverse in the lobbying at a furry convention. I had to remove a gray bunny from punching out a Nazi-wearing wolf from the premises before I had to call the cops. So, that was fun. Story 59. I worked security at a hotel during an oil convention. It was absolutely nuts. The whole town was pretty crazy, so the police would only show up for violence calls. I saw escort in the pool and running down the halls naked. Lots of gambling and drinking all over. The single strangest thing was Jello wrestling in the lobby. It's a 4-day convention, and the first 2 days were the worst. Good thing it only happens every other year. Story 60. I've worked for a few convention companies. Those photo ops they do require a massive amount of security. I've seen celebrities groped, bitten, spit on, licked, kissed, etc. The crazy part is that 99% of them carry on with the rest of their fans like nothing ever happened. If a stranger grabbed my crotch in public, I would not be fit to continue dealing with more strangers touching me. Story 61. I used to work at a software company that helps the police catch pedo. They would joke about parking a van outside of these conventions and loading all of the attendees in because there were so many offenders there. Story 62. A former science teacher of mine worked in a hotel somewhere outside of San Francisco. A furry convention went down, and he was the person who usually would clean rooms and stuff. He said he went into a furry's room, and he saw what looked to be a golden sex toy. He said it had like symbols and stuff on it and was shaped like a junk. Coolest teacher I've ever had. Story 63. Just picturing different people justifying why they were banned from conventions and how they were the victim. Whenever it comes up in conversation anyway. Story 64. Anime detour in Minnesota some years back. A quadrette of girls who decided to cosplay as clouds. Their costume was bra and panties covered in cotton balls. It was not very appropriate. They got to walk about for a bit of time before con staff realized how young they were and made them go back to their rooms and change. Story 65. I do con work for a few anime conventions. Here are a few off the top of my head. Ramen in a bathtub. Maple syrup in a bathtub. Someone throwing shots in the lobby. Glitter everywhere. Always run out of food at new location. When Vampire Night was popular, someone would end up hurt because far being bitten by a cosplayer. There is always one Karen. Story 66. A locked school rooftop behind a fence. A passed out knight in full armor. A dozen LARPers, cosplayers in full costume and gear. Since that, we added an extra lock to the roof. Is still not in the top 3. Story 67. Snoop Dogg came to town a few years back. Friend broke his leg and was hanging with GF at the front desk. Snoop and his entourage got back and saw him all bored, and Snoop got him to get ripped and play games with them. He also had to pay smoke damage for the top 2 floors El Mayo. Story 68. I worked at an anime convention once. We had to implement a don't turn the lights off in the video rooms rule because one year somebody got caught pleasure in the back. Story 69. I worked at the Grand Hyatt San Diego. About 10 years ago, during Comic-Con, staff had to kick Peter Dante out of the hot tub for having sex in it. If you've ever been, the pool area sits in between the 2 towers of rooms, so everyone could essentially look down and see what was happening. People who work in hotels, what are some of the scariest, unexplainable, creepiest things that you have experienced while working? Story 1. Not inexplicable, but scary at the time. Worked as a waiter in an old hotel in Scotland that was reputedly haunted. The restaurant and the part with the bedrooms were separate buildings and all ground floor. This is important. One afternoon, we were expecting 2 elderly sisters to check in for a few nights. Friends of the owner and regular guests. Though being a newish member of staff, I'd not met them yet. Well, one of the other waiters mentioned that they'd arrived, and would I go put a bottle of claret in their room while they were being helped out of the car? No worries. Picked a bottle, opened it, got 2 glasses in a tray, and nipped out the back of the restaurant, across the courtyard, past the 2 old ladies getting out of their car, and into the main building, turned into the corridor leading to the bedroom. Now, at this point, I knew there was nobody else in the building. No other guests, and only the owner and a couple of waiters were around between lunch and dinner service. I'd also been told the stories about the hotel ghost, apparently an old woman in gray who'd end her life when it was a coaching it. I was therefore perturbed to see a figure in faded Victorian dress shuffling away from me down the corridor in complete silence. WTF, to my credit, I didn't actually drop the tray, but I did eventually emit a noise resembling a Harrier jump jet winding up, causing the figure to turn around. One of the 2 old ladies, suffering with severe osteoporosis that caused her head to be below her shoulders, had been let in the side door ahead of me, so she didn't have to walk so far. Felt like an idiot. Told her I'd tripped with the tray, but saved it. Not sure she believed me. Story 2. This dude came up to me and asked for jumper wires. Thinking that his car battery has died, I got him some. He then proceeded to beat his son for not using a serious tag. Story 3. This isn't unexplainable, and in fact it makes perfect sense, but it was ducking scary. I worked at a hotel in Florida, a fairly upscale hotel. One day after a particularly bad string of thunderstorms, I went to go clean the pool. They had an actual pool guy they called from time to time, but only when the pool was really bad. When I first looked at the pool, I brought the manager outside and told him I felt like it was out of my scope. The pool was covered in debris. Leaves, plants, mulch, dirt, etc. He told me he thought I could handle it though, so I was like, whatever. Guess I'm scooping this ducking thing out with a net all day. So I start scooping. Probably had been scooping for an hour or so. This 10-10 knockout girl comes to the pool in her string bikini and asks if it's swimmable. I kind of look at her like she's retarded and ask her if she really wants to swim in that. She just kind of shrugged and decided to lie down in a sun chair till I finished scooping the pool out, which is fine by me. Great scenery while I work. We started making small talk, and finally she said she just wanted to dip her legs in. She does so, and after about 10-15 seconds, I noticed some weird-looking things swimming around in the pool, and they're coming right for her feet. I screamed, "Yo, get up, get out now!" She looks at me like I'm crazy, but gets out. I point, and she looks down, and about, 10, 12 of these duckers are now gathering near the wall where she was soaking her feet. She freaked out and ran off, and I assume went back to her room and had a nervous breakdown. I went and got the manager, told him to either call the pool guy or do it himself because I wasn't working with these monsters. He actually opened one of the pool filters and came across about 15 or so more of them in the filter. It was a sight you don't really unsee. Story 4. I'm an assistant manager at a fairly nice hotel in a little tourist town. It's in the quiet side of town, not many buildings or anything nearby. There's a little Italian place across the street and a subdivision visible from the hill. That's about it. It's normally really quiet, save for cranky old tourists who don't understand how to use wireless, so hey, whatever. Then, we ended up with a string of weird things started happening. 47-mile man, drunk guy who hit himself on the pool door, major substances bust, the weird cult-minded people who got mad at me for calling their cat fat, the angry Russian man with the vicious dog, and the keeper nobody ever acknowledged. Then the story about the thong. There was a guy named Michael, a childhood friend of one of the housekeepers back when I was a housekeeper myself. He was kind of sketchy, flirty, kept following us around every now and then. Occasionally, he'd rent a room using his friend's employee discount and would just stay for an extended period of time. This was one of those times. He was staying around for a week or so, and I was the person assigned to do his stayover. I went to go knock on his door, but before my fists could even connect, I just hear this god-awful howling and cursing from the other side. Just a string of duck yous from here to the end of time. Stuff about how much he hated whoever he was talking to. Crap about how it wasn't their job to judge him. Loud enough that people are filing out of their rooms to see what the ruckus is, and I'm just standing there with my hand outstretched, staring wide-eyed at the door. Then silence. I called the manager at the front and said I was scared to knock on the door because the guy was bat crap. He told me to forget it, but if he started yelling again to call down to the desk and he'd take care of it. Fine, okay? Then he started yelling again. I call the manager. He sends up the guy's friend, a dude named Will, from his break to go talk to him. Will goes in and vanishes for 45 minutes, then comes back out and calmly informs me it's no big deal. Michael was just talking to his mom. Also, he needs sheets, and this went on for a while. Antics include him drunkenly kicking a garbage bag down the hallway and leaving a trail of soggy corn pops in his wake, outright running from the desk attendant when she asked what his girlfriend's name was. Apparently, he didn't know who she was. And bringing in these dudes who basically stalked the head housekeeper in hopes of finding out if she was DTF. She wasn't. We were all more than a little thankful when he left, except we had to clean his room. Or rather, Christy, the housekeeper who'd been around the longest, had to clean his room. I watched her walk in, then I watched her walk out with this bewildered and horrified look on her face. She was always a little dramatic, so I just asked what was going on. They're everywhere. What is? Thong. Lo and behold, the room was trashed. Blood and crap were smeared across the walls like he was trying to paint a mural with human filth. Garbage bags practically exploded over the room. The bathtub and sink as black as night. But, more baffling, there were thong. And indeed, they were everywhere. Strewn about like confetti, unused and freshly clean. They were stuffed under the bed, hanging out of drawers, rammed behind the furniture, tied around the pipes. They were heaped in corners, they were laid out in trails, they were crammed in the sink. They were practically coming out of our ears. Just women's thong. Michael ended up fleeing altogether without paying the bill, so we never had the opportunity to ask him why the ducking hell he had so many thongs, or whose blood was on the wall, or why he decided to make a rainbow of crap in the bathroom. We've not heard from him since, and then his friend just went AWOL and stopped showing up to work. I swear though, Christy seemed to get this look in her eyes whenever anyone mentioned underwear after that, like it was a trigger word. Probably didn't help she found a displaced thong tucked away neatly on her cart a week later. I don't think I've seen anybody so bloodthirsty in my life. Story 5. This is definitely a true story. Not me specifically, but my mother used to work at a hotel in Washington, D.C. back in the 90s as a housekeeper maid since she needed money because she was a refugee from Vietnam. Even though she didn't know much English at the time, she knew enough to get by at her job, and all the other staff and hotel guests loved her because of how sweet she was. Because of this, anytime high-profile guests, such as the Backstreet Boys, would stay at the hotel, the manager always sent my mom to clean the room since she was good at it. Anyways, one day, a guest came, who will we refer to him as Mr. M because I don't know his real name, and checked into their most expensive suite. Usual, the manager told my mom to go take care of his room. As she got there, there was a do not disturb sign, so she told the manager she would come back later. What was weird was that no one was ever allowed in his room. The man stayed there for over a month, and not one time did he let a staff come in to clean. However, he paid a lot, and he gave a warm welcome every time he passed a staff member housekeeper, so no one paid him any attention. Then one day, people didn't see him anymore, so they assumed he checked out, even though the receptionist had no account of this. Since it had been so long since the room was cleaned and the Do Not Disturb sign wasn't on the door anymore, the manager told my mom to go check it out and try to clean up what she could. As she got to the floor and unlocked the door to the room, a disturbing smell hit her. She couldn't figure out what it was, but she continued to survey the room, which was disgustingly messy. Her words were that it looked like someone had thrown a rave, even though no other guests seemed to have ever gone into the room besides Mr. M. It had looked like Mr. M had deserted the place without telling anyone. Anyways, my mom was still shocked by the smell, so she tried to track it down. As she followed the smell, she could tell it was coming from the hotel room closet. When she opened the closet, there was nothing but a cardboard box on the ground from which the smell was resonating from. In the moment from being a housekeeper, my mother's first instinct was to open the box to see what it was and throw it out. When she opened the box, what she saw scarred her to this day. It was the decomposing part of the body. My mother immediately screamed and got out of there, where she fainted in the elevator. Once she woke up, cops were everywhere, and the hotel was like a CSI scene. The manager told her that Mr. M wasn't his real name, and he used a fake credit card to check in. Story 6. I've been working night shift at a hotel for about 3 months now, and as a little background, my mom worked for the police, so I know a lot of the deputies in the area. About a month ago, I came in and the person that works before me warns me that there's a crazy lady in room 106. I laugh it off and go about doing my boring hotel duties. I get a call at the front desk at around 3 in the morning, and who would have guessed it? It's the lady in room 106. She starts telling me about how her fancy $700 skirt she got from her church went missing, and goes on for about half an hour talking about how she's going to put in a police report if she doesn't get it back, and how she's not lying, and I could even look through her car and yada yada. I leave a note for my manager, and I don't hear back from her the rest of the night. The next night, however, I'm working as usual. And again, I get a phone call at the front desk. This time around 2:30 in the morning, and it's the lady in room 106. She doesn't bring up the skirt at all, so I assume she found it because a police report was never filed. This time she's complaining how the room next to her is making so much noise and she can't sleep, so I tell her I'll ask them to keep it down. I go down the hall to where her room is, and no joke, it was dead silent. I wait a bit, and after I don't hear anything, I just go back to the front desk. I wasn't going to wake up the people next door because they obviously weren't making any noise. I go home for the week as I only work weekends, and when I come in Friday night, everything is normal. Hell, I even forgot about the lady in room 106 until a deputy comes in with a picture of some woman on his phone asking me if I recognized her. In the picture, it looked like she was pissed off and about to slap either the camera or the person holding it. I don't recognize it at first, but as soon as he said her name, it clicked, and I realized that it was the crazy lady in room 106. Turns out she was caught huffing paint in the desert and was admitted to the mental hospital, and the officer was there to get info on her. At this point, I go into the computer and look her up, and it turns out she had a dog with her, so he calls animal control and they had to come and take it. This dog wasn't a poodle either. I suck at knowing dog breeds, but this thing was massive. So when they opened the door to pull it out, they noticed that this lady has a bird too, and the room was in terrible condition. They spent a few minutes trying to get the dog outside and into their car, and then more time trying to catch the bird. It was obvious something was wrong as this woman was trying to wash her clothes in the sink, and it was just a huge mess in general. After it all went down, I went home and got a call a few hours later while I was trying to sleep. It was the guy that works after me asking why they took the animals. Apparently she was dismissed and was back there and really annoyed they had taken them. Hotels are crazy, man. Story 7. I've worked in 3 different hotels in 3 different cities. The first one I worked in was a small hotel outside Cleveland, Ohio. I worked mostly second shift, 3 p.m., 11 p.m., and after 4 p.m., I was the only worker in the hotel. One night around 9 p.m., a guest comes down and says he can't get into his room. When that happens, we're supposed to remake the keys because the magnetic stripe is notoriously sensitive and deactivates at the drop of a hat or touch to a cell phone. But the man came back down to the desk afterward and said it still wasn't working. This was when he mentioned his wife is in the room and can't open the door from the inside. Yay, that's right, the door wouldn't open at all. The deadbolt inside the door had died and wouldn't move from the lock position. The poor guy was stuck outside of his hotel room for 5 hours, while the locksmith and the hotel owner tried to pop the door open. The door locks are awful 99% of the time. The night audit person at the same hotel once told me a really creepy story of a guest that came, said goodnight as he was walking by, and as she looked down the hall to see who it was, the person disappeared. As in, there was nowhere for the person to go in that short amount of time. The front desk is about 100 feet from the elevators and the fitness room and pool. So if she stepped out from behind the desk into the hall, she would have seen him. But by the time she did so, he had disappeared. She said he even called her by name as he said goodnight. When I moved back to California last year, I was working at a hotel in the Bay Area, and we had a lot of foreign guests. Most of them with either incredibly thick Asian accents or incredibly thick Indian accents, both of which are absolutely impossible to understand on the phone. I had someone yell at me over the phone in what I assume was very broken English because I couldn't help them get a room for that night because we were sold out. They were the highest level of points member and kept telling me so. That was the only part I actually understood. Finally, before I hung up on them, I said if they couldn't speak to me in a respectful and calm manner, that the next time they called and started using profanities, I would put my manager on. People who think they are entitled because they happen to be the highest tier of points member are kidding themselves. The highest level of points has the same power as a Safeway card. You don't get special treatment, especially if you call the hotel directly. I haven't really had a lot of wild run-ins with guests at the hotel, except for those stories. I mostly had crazy coworkers, especially at the small hotel in Ohio. I had a coworker who believed the government was after her, and our manager was working with them against her. She obviously had a mental problem that was undiagnosed, but my God. I had another coworker take a video of herself, while at work of herself, lip-syncing a Taylor Swift song in her bra and underwear while out in the lobby at 5 p.m. on a Friday. She got fired the next day. Story 8. Got into a lift from the top floor to head down. Lift stopped at 4th floor, door opened, saw people outside standing still, making no attempt to come in despite me being alone inside, and there was room for them. The automatic lift door then closed, and before it was completely shut, I heard someone outside said, "Why is the lift so full of people?" Story 9. I had to go to my great-aunt's funeral in rural Oklahoma, in other words, hell, a decade ago, and some ducking weird crap happened to us during those 3 days. Here's a basic account of the funeral itself from another thread, which was on our last day there. Imagine around 50 drunken hicks, housewives who were obviously scared to speak up, and many small sticky-handed children running around. So the prayer starts, the pastor's saying the prayers and stuff, but then some man starts calling the deep southern black pastor a jig'em-bob. More people start yelling at the man who is still yelling at the pastor. They're calling him a racist, Klansman, redneck, every insult in the book. He then slaps one of the women on the cheek and gets escorted out. Great. Now let's get on with this, I think. Wrong. The pastor just leaves, no amen or anything. He just walks out the door. Hell, I don't blame him. Well, this obviously pisses everybody off since, well, we're in the Bible Belt after all. One thing leads to another. Drunk rednecks are square dancing around the coffin. Kids are breaking crap. Beer's being spilled. It's crazy. We finally just leave when a morbidly obese redneck starts stripping on top of the coffin. We were done at that point. Drunk stripping redneck guys aside, here's what happened in the 2 days beforehand. Our first night there, we are introduced to our hotel room, which we will be living in for the next few days. The room looks like something from the bicentennial era. Wood paneling, metal blinds, and a TV set that would be more at home in a Searwish book ad. That's not the creepy part yet. The creepy part happens when I got to use the restroom. There is literally a small axe jabbed into the back of the door very cleanly, like no splintering at all. I also found a note on the toilet saying that the last guest had thrown up in the tank and the repairman would be by the next day. When I'm trying to fall asleep, I keep hearing something in the room that sounds strangely like the Backstreet Boys. Reach under the pillow and find out the previous guest left his cell phone behind, which had literally a single bar of battery life left, but was still playing I Want It That Way under a pillow. The next day I decided to get myself some food. My only feasible option is McDonald's. Since we're on the outskirts of a hellish and extremely tiny town that only has a golden arches, I walked there against my best judgment and found a finger bone on the side of the road. Literally, this was a middle human finger bone laying by the road that's ducked up. Later that day, I decided to go and find some non-biblical entertainment. Quite hard in my situation. I decided to try and watch whatever movie they might have had being shown at the local movie theater, which I doubt anyone had been in since 1989. I chose Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Yes, they were still showing that movie in 2005 and acted like it was no big deal. I couldn't even watch it all the way through because the projector broke. Story 10. I don't work in a hotel, but my job requires me to travel a lot. The most unexplainable experience for me happened during my stay in a hotel I frequent. After a long day, I tried to get some sleep as I had to get up early the next morning. But for some reason, I would hear this noise from the room above me. It sounded like someone dragging a table or chair across the floor as if they were rearranging their room. At first, I thought nothing of it, but this continued every few minutes for about 2 hours. I finally got fed up and called the front desk. They sent security to check it out. Turns out there's nobody in the room above. The noise continued after, and I had no choice but to switch to another room. Story 11. Worked in a motel when I was 17 to 18. I was at the front desk not working when the housekeeping guy called me to check something out in a room that was being cleaned. I go up there and the housekeeping guy is standing in the middle, pointing up to the ceiling. There was a set of bare footprints on the ceiling, which is at least 10 feet high. Bare. Not shoes or slippers, and only in the middle and nowhere else. There's no way he jumped that high upside down, and no prints on the walls either. Also, he left a single bullet on the bed. Story 12. I've come to realize, through my 2 years as a night auditor, that the things that shake you the most are not the weird noises you hear or the overwhelming feelings of loneliness at 3 a.m. The stuff that really gets to you simply being things that your guests do. There have been a few good incidents that have shaken me a bit over my tenure. An intoxicated man waving his gun around at 3 a.m., a woman having a schizophrenic breakdown in a room and having a violent dispute with herself, and a man wandering the halls talking to himself for hours on end. For the sake of the thread, though, I can remember one that struck me as extremely odd. One night, a few hours after I had arrived for my shift, a guest kept coming down and aimlessly wandering around the lobby and breakfast area. He was doing extremely odd things like talking to himself and sitting down at a breakfast table, only to stand up and switch chairs at the same table every 2-3 minutes. Every time I asked him if he needed help, he would get a little and mumble that he didn't need anything. Well, a few hours or so after he finally went to his room, he came back down and said he had turned the heater on and it made him short of breath and needed me to call an ambulance. So even though I was confused, I obliged. About a minute later, the hotel's fire alarm started to go off. The whole time the firemen were going up and down from his room, they kept asking if he had anyone with him or if he was alone, and I kept telling them that he was in fact alone and had no other guests in the room with him. After the firemen left and everything was back to normal, I went to go look in the man's room. He had rearranged all of the furniture and put the TV in the bathroom and had put his trash can in the middle of the room and set it on fire. The thing that troubled me wasn't the fact that the man intentionally set his room on fire and could have possibly burned the hotel down. It was the fact that even though he was alone, he had small children's clothes spread around the room. Story 13. Used to work the night audit, 11 p.m., 7 a.m. shift at a La Quinta. One morning around 6, a young couple around 22, 23 years old came downstairs asking if we had bleach and towels or any cleaning supplies available for their usage. Since I have never had a request like this before, I couldn't imagine why they were trying to clean the room. After inquiring what the mess was, they simply stated that one of them got sick. Taking pity on whichever one got sick, I told them we had housekeepers that could clean their vomit up after they checked out, and since they seemed to be in a rush to leave, to go ahead and scoot away. They pretty girl dipped, I pretty boy dipped shortly afterwards. My best friend was our maintenance man. I got a call around 11 from him, venting about how he was about to walk out on La Quinta. Apparently, every housekeeper adamantly refused to clean a room because there was literally crap sprayed on the wall, ceiling, and carpet. It had been smeared into everything. Apparently, the people occupying the room had made an initial attempt to clean their mess, then left the room to the poor cleaning lady. Our manager forced my friend to clean it. I convinced him not to walk out on his job. After he cleaned it, I apologized for not giving them bleach. I learned that if a guest is willing to clean something up, they were probably having crazy sex that just went wrong. Story 14. Worked as a main receptionist in quite prestigious hotel. I was only for half a year there because my boss was a nightmare incarnate, and I just left one day. Couldn't take it anymore. Anyway, I saw all kinds of weird crap going on there. No matter how hard you try to be discreet about the stuff you do in your rooms, staff will always know. Once, there was this huge convention full of important people, including some state officials. There was something wrong with one of the client's key cards. So I called his room if he can stop by the reception so we can get it checked. He said he's busy, but I can come upstairs if I want to with a new one. So I made a new one to exchange them. I knocked, and he opens up wearing nothing but his underwear. Behind him, I saw a camera with stative aimed at the bed and saw someone's feet there. He told me to come in and make myself comfortable. I said that's not really necessary. I need only his real old card and gave him the new one. Said I'm sorry for intrusion and walked away. Did I stumble into some adult audition? Never dared to investigate. No regrets. The other time, another convention. Accommodated some Asian guy from China. Anyway, after 2 days, he checks out, and during cleaning hours, one of the maids called me that I have to take a camera and come into his room. Oh boy, the instant regret. There was crap everywhere. Literally crap. On his sheets in the shower, on the furniture, so much crap it couldn't possibly come from one human being. Also some small bloodstain. I can't even fathom what the hell happened there. Made the photos and told manager about it. She didn't want to see the shots. Good decision. Anyway, the guy was banned from the hotel. And there was the more common stuff. Hot advances by guests, singles or pairs. I was invited by some arrogant billionaires to pick up any and how many girls I wanted to from a local nightclub. Refused. I'm not that kind of guy. Only to see them beaten up with torn clothes leaving early in the morning. Told one of them they had the stain on her cheek She turned around and gave me one incredibly frightened look, her lipstick smeared all over her mouth. Jesus. Oh, and the hotel was a money laundry and illegal wine and beer brewery was in the basement. Everyone in the town apparently knew, even cops, but didn't care. Job paid well, but the crap that I saw and knew and had to remain silent about was not worth the destruction of my innocent soul. That place was positively a den of evil. Story 15. Worked in a hotel when I was 18 or so, in a very, very rural part of northern Arizona. Like a 45-minute commute was considered great rural. Two things stand out. We had loads of contractors in and out because people build lake houses and such. I look young, so Christ knows how old he actually thought I was. He repeatedly phoned the front desk asking me if I wanted to party with him and the few other men with him, if I would go skinny dipping in the pool with them, if I would deliver things to the room, etc. The last one was terrifying, as it was quite obvious I was alone for my 8-hour shift. This continued each day he was there. He returned a few months later and seemed rather embarrassed that I was, once again, working the front. A male and female wanted to pay cash for their room. That's fine. We require either a $100 deposit or a valid card on file. He fought with me about it and eventually gave me a card. I ran the numbers after I'd given them their keys and, surprised, it declined. I phoned his room to explain that we merely authorize it to ensure it's valid because we need some recourse should damage occur to the room. He went absolutely bat crap. I could hear the woman in the background telling him to calm down and attempting to explain what I was saying, and he wasn't having it. He eventually slammed the phone down after growling, "I'm coming down there." I was on my cell with a friend in another state, at which point I gave him the address and made him promise to call the police if I didn't phone back in 10 minutes. The guest came down and was surprisingly calm, gave me a valid card, and I never heard a peep. It was the weirdest ducking thing. A bunch of other weird crap happened up there, mostly stories from coworkers when I did see them. Story 16. Getting goosebumps and kinda teary-eyed just thinking about this. So at the time and I were walking around the Queen Mary one day. It's a retired ocean liner that was turned into a tourist attraction. They turned a portion of the ship into a hotel room. So we were walking inside one of the long passageways on the ship. I don't remember what level we were on. Most of the doors were closed. The ones that were open were empty bedrooms with lights on. She was 4 to 5 steps ahead of me. Somewhere close to the middle of this passageway was an open door, but no light coming from it. She walks past it without even taking a look inside, but I take a quick glance to see what's inside. It kind of looked like a dark broom closet. Now maybe it was the angle, or the way I turned my head when I looked inside this room. I thought I saw something around the corner of my eye. So I instinctively looked behind me and saw what looked like another person on the same passageway as us, about 100 feet, about 30.5 meters away. The guy had something that looked like a naval uniform. Maybe one of the staff, I thought. Dude was just looking at our direction. Maybe we shouldn't be there. I don't know. The real creepy part was that he wasn't moving at all. He just stood there, with his arms to his side. I've been told that studies have found that after 25 feet, face perception diminishes. At about 150 feet, accurate face identification for people with normal vision drops to 0. But I could tell it was a guy from the figure and he had no expression whatsoever. He was just looking at me. If we weren't supposed to be there, he would have said something. I got this weird vibe about it, so I waved to him and said, "What's up?" No response. Since I said, "What's up?" my stopped and asked me, "What's up?" So I turned to her real quick and back again to the guy behind me. The dude was gone. I asked her, "You saw that, right?" She didn't know what I was talking about and asked me what I saw. I told her I'll tell her when we get off the boat because I knew she'd freak out. After I told her, sure enough, she freaked out about it. I haven't been back since because it's too far from me. We'll go again though. I want to know what that was all about. I'm not a superstitious guy and I don't get scared easily, but that was the creepiest thing I've ever experienced in a hotel. Story 17. Before I was born, my parents decided to move to the coast and open their own little seaside hotel. The first thing to do when they moved in was to clean all the rooms, so they took half each to speed things up. My mom told me this story when I was little. She was in room number 8 doing some vacuuming when the whole carpet started rippling. When I was little, I didn't think this sounded scary at all, as I just thought that maybe the carpet had got caught on the vacuum or something, and so I never really thought about it again. Fast forward to about a month ago. I remembered this old story and made fun of my mom a bit for thinking it was creepy when it was obviously explainable. She looked confused and told me I must have not understood her when I was little. Apparently, what had actually happened was that the entire carpet had rippled in a constant fluid wave type motion, and all the furniture and herself had been lifted up and down off of the floor for about 10 seconds. She then screamed bloody murder at my dad down the hallway and told him they were selling the place before it had even opened. He managed to convince her otherwise, but she never went back in that room. It scares more because my mom doesn't believe in the supernatural or anything like that and doesn't have any other creepy stories at all, just this one that she doesn't like to talk about often. Story 18. Not my story, but I am involved in a way. Several years ago, My college roommate, call her E, worked as the night manager for a newly built hotel. As was par for the course, I would often bring coffee in around half a.m. and chat for a while. One night I showed up to my find E sitting at the front desk, shaking her head, looking completely perplexed. Allegedly, she had just checked in what could only be described as the doppelganger of our other roommate, M, who was alike down to the same height, hairstyle, eye color, and southern accent, odd as we live in the north. E tried to speak with the new guest and show her a picture of M on her phone, but was rebuffed several times. We both chalked it up to coincidence, as we knew M was visiting her parents and we went on to enjoy our coffee. Shortly after 2, I decided to head home. It wasn't until around 2:30 when I pulled into our garage that I checked my phone to see a series of texts from E to M, and I at 2:17, "Stop, not funny, you guys suck, what the hell?" Naturally, I was confused and called her back. This is when things got weird and he sounded hysterical on the phone. Apparently, M and I, in the same clothes I wore earlier, had been standing at the end of the main hallway staring at her. E thought this was a joke and kept calling out to no response. Eventually, the front desk phone rang, and in the time it took to answer it, we both had disappeared. I calmed her down over the phone, and the next morning we talked through the possibilities, trying to rationalize what she saw. The guest who looked like M did come back to the front desk later that morning to inquire about some services, and much to E's surprise, looked only vaguely similar. The only thing that scares me to this day, and that I never told her, is that when I got into our house, the kitchen clock was stuck on 2:17, and directly next to it sat a photo of M and I smiling that I had only developed that afternoon. Still no explanations, and nothing ever weird happened at the hotel again, but it still makes me uneasy to this day. Story 19. So yeah, not me, but my uncle. Here goes. My uncle just got married in his 40s, his first marriage, and only so far. For their honeymoon, he, his wife, and her daughter, special needs child, she's awesome, went to stay in a cabin on Big Bear Mountain in SoCal. They rented the cabin, unpacked all their crap, and settled in for a 3-day stay. On the last night, my uncle was up watching TV very late at night. His wife and stepdaughter had gone to bed and he had to use the restroom. So he gets up, goes to the restroom, does his business, and exits the restroom. The only light on in the whole cabin is that from the TV in the living room, but it was bright enough to light the whole living room and part of the hallway. As he opened the door to the restroom, he saw his wife walk down towards the kitchen. He figured she'd gotten up and was hungry, so he was going to go talk with her. He followed after her, and when she reached the end of the hallway, she turned slightly in the direction of the kitchen, and then at warp speed, walked, ran, vaulted into the kitchen, faster than a human could move. This figure was wearing a long, flowing white gown, similar to the one his wife had worn to bed, and she had slightly longer than shoulder-length hair, kinda wigged out. He took a few steps back and peeked into the room where his wife and stepdaughter were asleep, and found both of them in bed, asleep. Needless to say, he couldn't sleep after that, and they left the next morning. He called up the guy that he had rented the cabin from and said, "Hey, you didn't tell me the cabin was haunted." And the guy said, "Oh, you saw her." He said, "Her," though my uncle hadn't specified what he had seen, proving that he knew a whacked-out speedster she-ghost was in fact haunting the cabin. He said after the fact that if whatever it was had turned and looked at him, he probably would have emptied the rest of whatever remained in his bowels and left at that moment. Story 20. I used to work for a big name chain property in California, high touristy area, relatively safe because of the high traffic of people. The people who stayed were mainly business people and families on vacation, not at all on the same level of sleazy motels. One morning, one of the housekeepers comes running to the front desk and is freaking out. Turns out one of the guests discovered a bag of unattended loaded guns in the fitness room. We have no idea who it belonged to, and cops are called. Management instructs me to sit in the fitness room and guard the gun bag and not allow anyone to take it while we wait for the cops to arrive. They didn't even lock me into the fitness room in case the owner decided to come back and retrieve their cache of guns. Mind you, I am a 5', 115 clubs girl with no self-defense skills. By then, word is sweeping through the hotel that there is a loaded gun in the fitness room. So I was half expecting some criminal dude to burst in at any minute. As someone who never encounters this sort of crap, this was definitely high on scariest moments while working. Story 21. Not a lot of creepy stuff, but weird or unsettling at times in a more grounded fashion. An empty handgun magazine, hidden inside a bathroom vent. No gun, just the magazine. A criminal on the run, hiding in various rooms, occupied or not. So long as he could slip in unnoticed. The cops gave up chasing him around and straight up left. A full-on police raid first thing in the morning just as I arrive at work at 7 a.m. Smack addicts threatening my life late at night after I'm forced to kick them out for causing regular disturbances, waiting for me out in the lot, and the local PD telling me, yeah, that stuff happened. An honest-to-goodness gypsy curse placed on the hotel by a pissed-off gypsy family. A trio of lonely, desperate, and wholly giddy Indian gentlemen in town as part of an IT company, insisting that I order them escort 2 older, disabled-ish gentlemen who had lived together in a single room with a single bed. Not because they were or gay, but because they were hoarders. They collected paperwork and electronic equipment, so much that their door could hardly open and were an ongoing fire hazard that our management refused to do anything about. Mysterious, unexplained bloodstains all over a room that had been unoccupied for some time. Don't worry, the housekeeper made sure to spray it down with Windex and lemon pledge so you'd never know it was there, lurking, waiting. The police department flat out informing me that my unassuming hotel had an obscenely high-profile reputation for serious criminal activity. This wasn't some Motel 6, but a nationwide chain used by a number of businesses and corporations for traveling clients and staff. I always wonder how people working the Marriott and Hilton cope with higher-priced insanity in Story 22. I was once in a hotel with my sister, and we were walking through the halls. Then we decided to have fun and see what staff doors were open. We got into the weight room, it was 3 a.m., was supposed to be locked, and started screwing with the weight equipment. Just as we were about to leave, this one employee gets up from the dark corner and walks out in front of us. We rush out just to see him walk down the stairs. Still in the mood of adventure, we head to the stairs and see her going down and down. She went to the basement and then gone. The stairs ended in a cutoff area and there was nowhere to go, but she was gone. Creeped out, we took a zigzag path back to our room to not be followed. Story 23. I work front desk. About an hour after checking a guest in, she came back downstairs asking to be moved. She happened to be in a room that connected to another room. After getting settled in, she said she started to hear noises coming from the other room, which weren't a concern until the other people tried to open her connecting door from their side. The gap between her door and the door frame was just wide enough to see just a sliver into the other room. So when she went over to tell the other person to stop, curiosity got the best of her, and she peeked through and saw a man staring at her from the other side. She told him to cut it out, and he just stood there at the door, trying the handle every once in a while. Not wanting to deal with it anymore, she came down and asked to be moved away from this creepy dude. Understandable. So I checked the computer and noticed that there is no guest registered in that room. So either someone at the desk goofed and didn't complete the check-in, or someone is in the hotel that shouldn't be. No one answered when I called the room, so I sent security up. He called from the room, saying that no one was in there. Our engineer happened to be at the front desk when I was discussing all this with another agent, and he mentioned that he had to go into that room to fix something. Mystery solved. He was in there fixing the door, making a racket, and spooking this poor woman. Except he was never able to get into the room because the door lock wasn't working. Even with his master key card, no idea why it started working again for security. Over the course of the night, nothing else happened and no mystery man was ever found. The guest was a regular, so I didn't think she was screwing with us. Although I'm sure she could have just seen something in the shadows or whatever. Still pretty creepy at the time. Story 24. I've worked in hotels for the past 3 years, working every shift that exists. The stories that you get when you deal with people all day can be interesting. I've had drunken fights. I've had the police called. One time a lady stayed with us and she would sit in her room and just roll up sheets of toilet paper into little wads and leave them in her room. At first, we didn't realize what she was doing, so we kept supplying her with more rolls. After the housekeepers cleaned her room though, we had to cut her off. Little toilet paper wads were everywhere. After she left, she called back and swore at our GM for the poor service, saying that we refused to give her a roll of toilet paper. The moment that I don't think I'll ever forget, though, is that we had this guest staying with us. Seemed like a nice guy, but always had a generic water bottle on him filled with pinkish liquid. It didn't take me long to figure out that he was an alcoholic and that he was just always drunk. Every time I saw him, I would make silent judgments about him. One night, I was working night audit, and I was setting up breakfast when he came down. It was super slow, so we just talked for a couple hours, and he told me a story about how he was happily married and had a child with his ex, but they grew apart and got divorced. About how he didn't have much time for his son because he was busy working. About how he had gotten remarried to the love of his life, only for her to get into a car accident and pass away. This was a man that needed the alcohol to function. He had many troubles in his life, and he needed the alcohol to forget them. He left the next day, and after he had gone to bed, I never saw him again. But that encounter was an eye-opener for me. He had mentioned that he was in the process of writing a book about his life, and I regretted that I didn't write down the name of it. Story 25. I used to work in a hotel in Southern California doing security. Every night we would get a printout of what rooms were vacant. It was my job to go through all the rooms, ensure all lights are off and all windows are secure. I went into a room and found all the lights on. Typical of housekeeping after they clean. I started turning the lights off from the left side of the room, around to the windows and up to the bathroom. The bathroom has French-style doors that open outward toward the room. The doors themselves have only hinges and 2 handles to pull them open. No other devices attached. The doors are also the very lightweight slatted wood. Anyway, I opened the left door out all the way so I could reach around it and turn the light off in the bathroom. After turning the light off, I realized it was freezing in the room, which is not uncommon. Being housekeeping liked it cold when they worked on a room. I reached up for the thermostat, and when my hand was within 4 inches of it, the left door I just opened at the bathroom slammed shut. Terrified, I ran out of the room immediately. While pulling the door shut behind me, the door deadbolt pushed itself out of the lock and it slammed into the door frame. I was petrified when I had to reach inside the door to disengage it. I stood there for a minute or two, with my eyes watering, wondering what had just happened. I decided to go back in and look to be sure of what happened. I went in and looked at the door. It was shut. I moved it around to see if it would close on its own, which it wouldn't. I tried throwing the door to slam it, and the door is so lightweight, it caught a lot of air and wouldn't even shut all the way after throwing it closed. As far as I see it, there isn't any explanation for what happened. I stopped going into that room. Story 26. I worked at a hotel for about a year. It was usually pretty good. Some people would stay at the hotel for weeks or a month at a time for business reasons. But there was this one old lady that had been there even before I started working that just stayed in her room all day, occasionally leaving to go down the hill and pick berries or something along the street, maybe get food or other supplies. IDK, she really wasn't a problem other than not letting people into her room. About January of this year, she started acting weird, like yelling at people, walking by her room, calling down to the front desk, and being angry about things that had never happened. This goes on for about a week, and then she just goes off the deep end. She starts standing outside of her room, yelling at people that entered her sight no matter how far away they were. She would call down to the front desk, but now she would say eerily creepy things like, "You shouldn't have done that. You'll be sorry for that. I can find you." And then she'd hang up. Eventually, after about 2 weeks, we forcibly ejected her after her credit card declined. She threw a fit and had to be removed off the premises by her son. Let me tell you, going into that room was like entering hell. Stains all over the carpet, blood and feces spread across the walls in the bathroom, blood on the mattresses, empty cans everywhere, jarred foods that stank to high heaven, boxes sealed shut, some with black ooze dripping out of them, light bulbs stacked in the corner, all in perfect condition but not used in the lights. It was horrible. Found out she went off the deep end because she had been denied her pills for some kind of mental thing. Story 27. I have never worked at a hotel, but I've had a few occurrences of weird crap while working at certain restaurants. First time, I worked at a Subway-esque fast food joint. There were the normal jokes of a local ghost in the building. We named it Annabelle, after the Conjuring movie and the Warren family. One time, one of my coworkers was in the back washing dishes while me and another coworker were up front talking, as the place was completely dead. Out of the blue, the first coworker starts screaming at the top of her lungs and runs out saying something touched her back. We checked the camera footage that she was in front of at the time. Nothing showed up. A second restaurant I worked at was this renovated cotton gin from the 1920s down south. There were technically 3 floors due to the slant of the building and the hill it was built on. There's a stairway leading to the 3rd floor that has a few tables, a meeting room, and a small, intimate patio seating. The main floor is a huge room with high ceilings and tin roofing, which also had a patio with live music and a view of the nearby creek. The downstairs leads to the bar and the kitchen, as well as the back banquet room that we used for larger events. One of my old managers refused to be in the building by herself. A group of us would hang around after hours, and this manager always asked me to come stand with her. A few other coworkers were the same way. I frequently felt like I was being watched while I was there, but I never really had any more serious experiences of my own. I just always heard of what happened to my coworkers. The only thing I was there for was this one time, we opened the place up and every electronic item in the place was unplugged. And I literally mean every single one, including the bar freezer. The closing manager wasn't someone capable of getting to that freezer plug in the first place. Story 28. I worked at a Holiday Inn a year ago and only can recall a few weird cases. One was that every now and then we would get complaints that a young girl was screaming in the pool area. When checking it out, you would find that nobody was around. Management reported that a young girl drowned in the pool years earlier. One night I was working the front desk and received a call from a room complaining that the room above them was stomping around and being noisy. Nobody was checked into that room, and nobody was there when I checked it out. Guess a wife killed her husband in the room. Also after the murder, the room was turned into storage. And despite it being empty, the front desk would get random calls from that room. I'm sure all of it is explainable, but crap was weird to me. Story 29. Hotel bartender here. Started a few months ago at a more upscale place. It was a quiet evening and a distraught-looking guy came to the bar and ordered a shot and a beer. I was catching some ducked-up vibes. To lighten the mood, I tried to drum up some lighthearted conversation. He tried to talk but couldn't. So I asked him if everything was all right. He said no. I asked, well, what's wrong? Anything I can do to help? How about a plate of some food? On the house, buddy. He declines, proceeded to tell me the escort. He ended her life in his room's bathtub. I jumped back and was like, holy crap, I'm calling 911. After calling 911, I ran back to the bar to find the man slumped on the bar, not moving. I run over to check on him and his pulse is weak and he is pale and cold. After the police and medics arrive and cleaned up the mess, dead escort and dead depressed businessman. There was the man's death note found in the room by another guest a few days later. Yep, a few days. That said he wanted to feel a woman's touch one more time before overdosing on something that hit him at my bar. Ducked up. I got a week off work to deal with it and was shocked when I came back. Everything was like nothing happened. Story 30. Right here at work a few nights ago during night shift. I was typing up an email to a customer and saw something out of the corner of my eye. I ignored it for a moment and kept working. Then it sunk in. It was a ducking person just staring at me through the window. As I turned my head, they slowly walked out of my view towards the parking lot. So I hauled ass outside to confront them and they were gone. Not a soul in sight for miles. I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched the rest of the night. Story 31. I was cleaning a bath one beautiful morning. As I picked up the soap to throw it in the trash and spray the tub, I realized I was holding a handful of semen. I quit and bleached my hand on the way out. Story 32. This happened roughly 4 years back. My wife worked at a Holiday Inn, and this isn't unexplained, but more horrific. There was a guy staying there for more than a month. I picked my wife up at night and often used their lounge, which is where I met him. He was early 20s and a Marine based on the uniform he always wore. To be frank, he kind of annoyed me. One day, while I'm not there waiting on my wife, he calls down to the front desk and asks that they call the police. He says someone's going to get hurt. They make the call and then see through their system that he also called 911. They, my wife, and the assistant manager, really can't do anything at that moment, but continue with work. Apparently, police came about pretty regularly, mostly dealing with drunks. The assistant manager had to deal with something out in hotel, and a minute or two later, the police show up and my wife went out to show them to the stairs. When she goes by the lounge, the Marine is there with a pistol pointed at the head of the assistant manager, who is face down on the ground. He points that gun at my wife. A moment later, he spots the police, and she manages to hide back in the office. She heard 2 shots, and that was it. The Marine had a pellet gun. There are a lot of details left out here. My wife is fine these days. The Marine had a rough go, and I hate to this day that I didn't take the time to really talk with him. Story 33. Had this doctor check in, he was acting really, and kept grabbing his stomach. I asked him if everything was all right and if he needed any meds. He told me he was fine and that he also wanted me to put an alert on his ACC not to have housekeeping enter his room during his stay. This isn't common, but also not unheard of. I did what he asked and checked him into the far side of the resort. 3 days into his stay, we had to send security to his room because a server said he was soliciting her for sex. I had to help security enter the room at the time because multiple people have to be present for the wellness check. We enter and are quickly overcome by the smell of crap. We covered our faces. I tried leaving the room, but the security guard stopped me. The room had crap smeared everywhere. The ceiling, floors, beds, and curtains. I had never seen anything like it before. We found the doctor laying in the bathtub, which was also filled with crap, drinking water. The worst part is his wife was sitting next to him, rubbing his head. The police took him in. It turns out this doctor had lost his practice taken away and was skipping town. The reason he crap everywhere is because he had consumed a week's worth of laxatives in efforts to pass a gallbladder stone. Police also found med on him and in his system. Even though it was months ago and the room has been redone, I still avoid putting people in room 1810. Story 34. A few years back, I was interning at a big business hotel. That means that during the day, it's mostly empty while all the guests are on about doing their businessy stuff. At this particular instance, I had to go into one of the executive suites and check if the housekeepers did their jobs, if the special requests are met, leave newspapers, blah, blah, blah. So I knock ferociously on the door because the suite is big and with many rooms, yell, "Housekeeping," crack the door and yell, "Housekeeping" again, despite that I know the occupants have left the hotel for the day. When I opened the door, I had a straight line of sight from the entry to the living room to the person who specially moved one of the very heavy-set armchairs. So it's the only thing I see and it's facing right in my direction. Said gentleman, sitting in the chair, was from Asian descent, dressed in his graying and going transparent tighty-whities, resting his hands on the sides and with spread legs. My favorite part was that he didn't break eye contact with me and was moving his mouth like talking, but there were no words coming out. I froze of shock, so this went on for more than 5 seconds. Right after I kind of peed my tights, said "excuse me" in 3 languages at the same time and ran off. The occupants of the room were husband and wife from Germany, very non-Asian. I spent the rest of the day stalking that apartment. The guy never came out. I know there is a logical explanation for this, but it was so creepy. Story 35. I used to work in my aunt and uncle's hotel in a Scottish village about 12 years ago, and the freakiest crap that happened to me was one night when I was sleeping in the staff quarters and heard a banging noise from along the corridor. This was about 3 a.m. after most of the staff had gone to bed. I got up to go and tell whoever was coming in late to shut the duck up so I could go back to sleep. But the corridor was empty. Well lit, I have to add. This is key. So I walked down the end of the corridor to see if it's folk coming up the stairs drunk or whatever. I looked down to see a figure stomping up the stairs. The only way I can describe it is as though a shadow of a person that was solid. There were no features on the face or clothes on its body. Imagine someone in a black morph suit walking along, but you could see things through them. I turned and ran back to my room and shut the door. I could still hear the stomping for some time, and I don't think I got a wink of sleep at all that night. I didn't leave my room until the sun was shining through my window. I asked a few of the other staff if they heard the banging the night before, but nobody else had. And like Duck, was I gonna mention seeing shadow men coming up the stairs at 3 a.m.? Story 36. I worked at a B&B in Savannah, GA for a while, when I wasn't in school. It was downtown, so the building was a really old house that had been converted and updated a bit. It had 4 floors, including the garden level, slightly below street level, but the effective first floor is the second. And not surprisingly, the higher up in the house, you got the nicer the rooms. As with most of Savannah, most of the buildings are supposedly ducking haunted as crap. Like filled to the brim. Ghostbuster backpack level, full of ghosts just all over the place. This B&B wasn't the worst for stories. There was an old condemned house not far away that the parents starved their daughter in the top bedroom. That was pretty creepy, but I don't think any murder went down in ours. I do remember on the top floor landing, if it was really quiet, you could hear what sounded like children running around, and sometimes you'd hear whispers. I remember a woman I knew worked in another B&B, and she claims she opened the dumbwaiter, and there was a human torso standing in there. She shut it, and it was gone when she reopened it. Story 37. The swinger parties were always extra interesting. Conventions of 60, 150, mostly couples. You paid extra if you were a single due to uneven number. They would rent out whole floors and take over the pool area. We had to add black shades to cover up the entire indoor pool area as it had floor-to-ceiling windows. I was a bartender and saw so many businessmen pick up escorts. There were quite a few sting operations to sniff them out while I worked there. They arrested something like 65 one night. Worst ever was the wedding weekend riot. 4 different wedding groups staying in the hotel, drinking until I shut down at 3 a.m. One bride felt a bridesmaid from another wedding was looking at her new husband. The bride and her bridal party jumped the other bridesmaid so badly, her scalp needed to be reattached, and she lost sight from one eye. Men soon got involved, and cops stormed in from 8 different neighboring towns. The worst image was a man covered in blood, holding a huge gray goose bottle over his head like a gladiator as he beat one of the grooms with it. Story 38. Not me, but my cousin worked in a pretty popular hotel in New York City. There was a particular room that was always unoccupied, and the hotel workers would use it to take naps. My cousin threw her coat on a chair that was facing the window and took a nap in the bed. She said she felt the weight of someone getting into the bed, and she immediately sat up. There was no one in sight, but her coat was now on the bed, and the chair that had been facing the window was facing the bed. Could have easily been her coworker creeping, but still spooky. Story 39. Worked as a chef for a Hilton. Remember speaking with one of the managers of a different downtown hotel, very high-end, and he told me this story. Manager was on his way out of the hotel after working one evening and saw a homeless guy a ways out sleeping on the lawn. He decided to walk back in and tell the front desk employees to try and get him off property. Came back in for work the next morning and saw the same homeless guy still sleeping on the lawn, so he ran in to chew out the front desk manager about how the employees didn't do as he asked. They both walked out to get the bum to leave, and they found the bum was wearing a nice suit coat. Turns out it was a wealthy businessman who had jumped off the 12th story balcony and had just been dead there all night and half the day. Turns out no one saw him fall. Sad story, actually. Story 40, 2010, New Orleans for our honeymoon. I had booked us at Le Pavillon Hotel, reputed to be one of the most haunted in the city because my wife is really into that stuff, and any brownie points I could accrue, I did. We had gotten off the plane from Lax and taxied to the hotel. Absolutely gorgeous, hauntings aside. Plus, they offered free sandwiches nightly in the lobby, which is even more awesome. As I was walking and rolling both our suitcases, one in each hand, with my messenger bag strapped across me, the suitcase in my right hand suddenly spun away from, across the floor and falling with a loud thump. I had a very angry look on my face, and the two girls at reception looked at each other and said, "The ghost!" They filled us in on the story as we checked in, and we headed up to our room. The wife was ecstatic that something supernatural happened so soon, and we proceeded to have some very awesome sexy times when we finally got to our room. I never told anyone until now that I was super pissed at myself because I had accidentally and clumsily kicked the suitcase with my right foot as I was walking, causing it to spin out of my grasp and out of control. Story 41. Worked at a Sky City casino here in NZ as a cleaner, doing the rounds with my coworker when we reached the women's toilet located on the actual gaming floor. As per usual, my colleague knocked on the door, opened it a crack, and yelled, "Is anyone in here?" A voice replied, "Yes, I'll be out soon." Sweet, as so both he and I stand against the wall either side of the door and wait. 10 minutes go past and we both look at each other and shrug, as if saying, "What the duck is taking here so long?" Another 5 minutes pass and we are pissed. So again he knocks on the door and just says, "Hello." No reply, so worried something has happened to her, we open the door up expecting to see some lady passed out drunk or something else equally unsettling to deal with. But instead, we see a perfectly spotless toilet, which is about as rare as finding a diamond in an apple, with only one thing standing out: handprints all over the center mirror above the sinks. Needless to say, we both looked at each other and we were both looked like as white as snow. There are other stories both he and I have experienced, but that's the first and most prominent one in my memory.